The New York Knicks final preseason game was a flop, a big-time flop. Gavin, Schall, Alex Wolfe to take you through the Washington Wizards Avada cadavering the New York Knicks 131-106. We get into it now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. I want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, because that would make you an everydayer and therefore one of my best friends. If you want to join that elite crowd of people, all you have to do is subscribe on YouTube and hit that notifications bell so you never, ever miss an episode. And be sure to do the same on your audio podcast platform of choice. But you say, Gavin, that's not quite enough for me. I want to be on the list of super best friends. Well, that's easy to do as well. You can join our Subtext, which allows you to communicate with us on a daily basis. We will send you all of our thoughts on the New York Knicks post-game, pre-game, every single part of the day, and you can respond with your own, ask a bunch of questions, and it's a whole lot of fun. If you want to subscribe to that, the link is in the description to each and every episode, both on YouTube and on the audio side. But who's talking to you? I'm Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster, still getting out the kinks, much like the Knicks. He's Alex Wolfe, editor-in-chief of The Strickland, the greatest Knicks website in the whole wide world. You can check them out on all forms of social media at thestrick.land. And Alex, boy, oh boy, I'm happy I got to do the intro, because I don't really want to talk about this game first. An embarrassment for the New York Knicks, kind of. It's still the preseason. It doesn't really matter. But is there some level of concern in the game that is supposed to be the closest thing to the real thing, that the Knicks saved their starters for, and they just got toasted by the team that is supposed to be at the bottom of the Eastern Conference this year?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say first off, I wonder if maybe that's being a little overblown with regard to Washington. Like, Poole clearly is ready to just put up tons of shots this year. Now, whether he's super efficient in doing that will determine whether he has sort of a breakout season as like a primary scoring option, or if he just becomes a straight chucker. I guess that remains to be seen. But, you know, they didn't even have Kyle Kuzma in this game. So, like, they might be better than we think they're going to be, because Tyus Jones looked really good too. Either way, though, the Knicks still, in theory, we're going like 100% in this game. And we're supposed to be kind of doing like a dress rehearsal for the regular season. It got called that like a million times on the broadcast, and we were calling it that yesterday. Like, this was supposed to be the one where you sort of see how things might go. And I think my main concern, like, bad games happen. Players go off sometimes. Poole clearly just got hot and then never cooled off in this game. You know, I kind of just kept waiting for the other shoe to drop with that. And it sort of did early in the second half. And then he just kind of caught fire again and just buried the Knicks the rest of the way out. And then you have like Mike Muscala doing his best Miles Turner 2 years ago impression and hitting 5 threes consecutively in the first half to just kind of like break the Knicks back early on. So those sort of nights happen. It was more just that I can't help but worry based off the odd year, even year curse that we've seen with the Knicks the last few years. It's just a smidge worrisome to see them go out there and look at all complacent and like they're sort of like they were pretty lackadaisical. You know, I didn't totally love the energy level throughout. It felt like they were sort of lazy on their rotations, that they weren't necessarily treating this like, okay, this is our last chance to like get in real game reps, and then it's a week off, and then we play the freaking Boston Celtics a week from tonight. It sort of just felt like they were going through the motions a little bit. You know, some of the guys had their moments. Like, we'll talk about Julius Randle in the second segment and how fantastic he played. I thought RJ Barrett had a pretty solid game overall. Mitchell Robinson continued to play really well, but like on the aggregate, I thought that it was a little concerning just from like the perspective of, if this is a dress rehearsal, I don't think they're ready for opening night, you know, which is not great to see from a team that is going to have a lot of expectations. But I'm also willing to wipe the slate clean and just say, hey, hopefully they put it behind them and come out full steam next week against the Celtics, which I'm sure they will. But I just didn't think this was necessarily the best showing for the final effort of the preseason and what was supposed to be sort of a mock regular season game.
I can't help but think Tom Thibodeau went into the locker room after this game and said, you know what, all the haters out there who told me to rest my guys, who said it would be crazy to play everyone 35 plus minutes in back-to-back preseason games. F those guys. Like, I think he tried to take a healthy, modern approach this preseason, right? Didn't play guys too much the first game. The second game even was a little bit restrictive with their minutes. The third game, because the NBA is ridiculous and scheduled preseason back-to-backs, which should never, ever, ever be the case. The same thing happened with the Celtics, obviously, in the Knicks' very first game of the preseason. Tibbs was forced not to play his guys. And Alex, we've seen essentially like a game and maybe 2/3 of like legitimate rotation, like legitimate action. They didn't even have Immanuel Quickley tonight, which we can get to. I think that maybe has interesting implications for where his contract negotiations are at, but that's an aside. I think the team looked almost how you would expect them to look, given those facts. Like they just haven't had a lot of real time on the court together. And you said the word, and I totally agree with it. They look really disjointed, particularly defensively, not at all playing on a string. Offensively, there's a real lack of intensity. There were just like easy decisions that were turned into complicated plays. Like there were two different times, like one where Brunson got all the way into the lane and he looked Randle off wide open for three and tried this really tricky pass to Dante DiVincenzo that got knocked away. And then he had another one in the third quarter where he had a wide open 10-foot jumper, which is basically an 80% shot for him. And he passed it up to try to like squeeze it into Isaiah Hardenstein between two defenders. And that got knocked away. And that was to me emblematic of the night for the Knicks. Their best decision maker kind of getting in his own way. And it's just frankly doesn't look like a team that's ready for that opening night game against Boston. Granted, Tibbs is probably going to kill them for the next week. So we could see a completely different unit coming out. But I think it's a little worrisome given how tough the schedule is and just how many back-to-backs they have to start the season.
Yeah, I guess that's the big thing is, you don't want to see them not bringing it with how tough the schedule is to start the season. Because we've seen in some years for this team, when they come in with expectations and you have that tough schedule to start, you can really put yourself on the wrong foot early. And particularly in New York, I feel like that's less tenable than in other cities where you're just going to get killed. If you start off and, get out to like a 5-10 start or something as the Knicks, when you have these expectations from last year, like it's going to really, put the pressure on early. And then we see that's when things start to crack a little bit. That's when the fissures get created between the players and the fans and everything else and all the stuff we saw 2 years ago. So, I think all we could do is just kind of hope that this was just a matter of these guys being like, all right, it's our last preseason game. We get a week after this to get fully ready for the Celtics. They certainly came out early. And I thought in the first quarter, especially, which we could talk about more, maybe they looked really great. Like there was a lot of sequences that like really, really raised my eyebrows in that first quarter, especially. Like I wrote down a bunch of them. It's like the very first basket was like a moving dribble handoff from Mitch to RJ, who then like Mitch sort of set a screen for RJ. Then RJ kept things moving and drew all the defense up to him. So it was awesome lob to Mitch. That was awesome. Grimes ripped like a really great three over some pretty good defense from Jordan Poole. Brunson got out in transition, hit a really nice floater. And then Julius was just like insane. I mean, he hit 2 threes early, had 10 points, I think, in the first quarter. They shot up the stat that I'd almost forgotten about from last year, that Julius was second only to Luka Doncic in first quarter points last year, and just how amazing of a skill that is for him. And then threw down this crazy, crazy thunder dunk, which we'll get to more in the second segment. But, I did think that they came out with that sort of fire. I almost wonder if maybe there was a part of them that just kind of saw Poole start going off, saw, Mike Muscala hitting those threes, and then kind of just waved the white flag a little bit early just to be like, do we really feel like coming back from 15 down in a preseason game and extending all that effort? And we even saw Brunson make like a somewhat scary play in the third quarter where he was cutting between 3 guys and the one rookie on
Ryan Rollins,
yes, whose name was escaping me for a second there. He ended up on the ground, and Brunson, it looked like almost stepped on him and almost like twisted an ankle or something. And so I wonder if at a certain point the Knicks themselves just kind of said, all right, let's take an assessment of whether this is worth it to make this comeback now, given that these guys just came out on fire. And maybe it was just kind of a business decision. I don't know. I don't want to make excuses for them because I wish they had played a little harder. But again, if they play good next week, it's all's forgiven. No big deal.
Yeah. Absolutely. I want to get into someone who did have a really good game, Julius Randle. You mentioned the hot start. He continued into the second half, certainly looks to be in fantastic shape to start this season. But Alex, before I do that, I want to quickly shout out one of our favorite partners on this podcast, and that is our friends over at Jase Medical. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world today, and it's important to be prepared. The Jase case is a personalized emergency medication kit that contains 5 essential antibiotics that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. You can also customize your case and add life-saving medications based on your unique needs. Jase Medical now offers customizability for your Jase case with dozens of add-on medications. Choose the medications that best fit you and your family's unique needs. Jase is continually working to expand their medication offerings. Buy a gift card for family or your loved ones so they can get a Jase case of their own. Go to jasemedical.com and enter promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. That's promo code LOCKEDON at jasemedical.com. All right, Alex, we are back. Julius Randle is certainly back. He looks to be in fantastic shape to start this year. You mentioned the first quarter dunk that I think I would say had served to wake the Knicks up, except to your point, that was before Mike Muscala turned into prime Dirk Nowitzki, and the Knicks were actually playing pretty well. But I thought that was him maybe trying to set the tone and saying, hey, we're a week away. Like, let's get this thing rolling. And then in the second half, when the Knicks were down by a whole bunch, had a personal 8-0 run, they got the lead all the way down to 82-80. The Wizards ripped off, like, I think the next 13 points or something like that to reassert control. But I'm just really impressed with the kind of shape he's in, the aggressiveness that he showed. Three-pointer looks pretty good. It's been a nice preseason for Julius Randle when he's been out there.
Yeah, for as good as he looked last year, as far as his conditioning and everything else, he looks even slimmer this year, but still functionally very strong. But, that liftoff on that dunk was crazy. I mean, I can't remember him ever. I mean, he had some thunder dunks like that before, but just like the quickness he was able to find the spot for that dunk, I think is new. I think he's kind of found something different here, which is kind of odd because you would think that after rehabbing from that ankle injury, he might have actually sort of gone through some of the issues that Mitch did a couple years ago and bulked up a little too much, like tried to just kind of be like, well, I got to be active somehow. And, just kind of hit the bench and the curls and, all the upper body stuff more than, working the just lower body cardio, all that stuff. But it seems like he put a huge focus on that and he looks really good. I mean, so does Mitch, actually. Those two in general, I think both look just like they're in probably the best shape I've ever seen them in going into this year. But yeah, Julius was just like, this is the first game where he sort of showed his true self in many ways. I think this preseason, it seemed like he was being almost overly deferential the first few games of the preseason, where it was like he wasn't necessarily looking to score, especially like the first 2 games. He seemed very like, he only played the first 2 games, but it seemed like he was very much just trying to like kind of feed others and play within the offense and, not necessarily look for his own shot. And this one, in a good way, he was kind of looking for his own shot a bit, hit the step back 3 that, has become one of his most deadly shots that he has, hit that dunk, was getting inside and doing that to pretty good effect as well. Although he only got to the free throw line twice, or for 2 attempts, I should say, just one trip to the free throw line, but also was rebounding the ball really well. I thought that he and Mitch had their trademark, kind of 1-2 punch of rebounding, where Mitch, did a great job of boxing out and of, getting the offensive boards, and Julius did a great job kind of crashing in and grabbing those defensive boards and getting things going that way. So I really enjoyed Julius's game. I thought this was definitely his best game of the preseason by a wide margin. And if you take one positive away from this game, it's definitely Julius Randle's play.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe one other positive is Immanuel Quickley, who missed this game, and it kind of got the gears turning in my head, Alex. I don't know if this is maybe reading too much into something that it was possibly just him tweaking an ankle, but I'm wondering if we're getting close on an Immanuel Quickley contract extension, and him sitting out tonight was precautionary because obviously when you're negotiating what could be $100 million plus contract, you don't want to tear an Achilles or tear an ACL 2 or 3 days before something like that is done.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's very like I don't know, maybe telling that they did sit him for this one, because I don't think that's coincidental. Like I don't recall seeing any actual news about an injury or anything going into this. So, we've got a week now. Like I think until Tuesday night, they're
Yeah.
allowed to sign him. So I'm hoping maybe I'm hoping that it's a case of maybe his agent called the Knicks and maybe even called Tibbs directly and said, "Hey, can you just do me a solid and sit quick for this game? Like, we're working on this deal, but like, I know it's a small chance, but I really, if he gets hurt, it literally takes away millions of dollars from him at this particular juncture." So hopefully they're real close. I mean, I would love to have that solved by the start of the regular season. Maybe there would be something too quickly having a prove it year. I feel like he's the right type of guy for that. If they didn't come to an extension and then he had a whole year to just be like, well, I'll show you guys and I'll get even more in restricted free agency next year. But I think I would much prefer, I'm sure Quickly would much prefer having that peace of mind and that security and that just overall faith from the team going into the season. So yeah, here's hoping because otherwise the Knicks, I mean, this created some kind of awkward situations, which I think we could talk about in the next segment, but like they played sort of a weird rotation in this one. So I would have loved to have actually seen if Quickly were able to play because I left a little confused about where things stand for the rotation going into the regular season because it didn't seem like Tibbs was super interested in trying to work a 9-man deal there, which is interesting considering that was like the thing that became his trademark last year after he made that change and then things worked out so well for the Knicks down the stretch. So I guess we'll see when Quickly gets back next week, hopefully with a shiny new extension, how things work out. But for now, I'm with you. I do hope that's the case. I hope they're getting ready to pay him. He definitely deserves it. And I would love to see Quickly be a Knick for a long time, but if nothing else, have a deal that should the Knicks go superstar hunting sometime in the next year as well, it would probably be after this year, in the next offseason that, they would have a guy on a really, really talented player on a hopefully a good, fair contract to potentially use in those sort of things as well. But selfishly, I kind of hope that they just keep Quickly.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a win for the Knicks to get him on that contract because it makes it much easier to deal him potentially, but it also is just I can't help but feel whatever the number is, it probably will end up being a steal for the Knicks or whatever team he ultimately ends up on. But we can mention that rotation because I think honestly it was more interesting than pretty much anything else that happened in this game. So we discussed this on the our annual Knicks Film School crossover that's going to drop this morning. But with Quickly out, you would generally just expect Deuce McBride to slot into that spot, and that would be it. And RJ Barrett to play a bunch of minutes with the bench. Instead, Evan Fournier still got run in what was supposed to be, again, like how the Knicks would treat a regular season game. And I think there are a couple of things that play there. Quentin Grimes picked up 3 fouls 5 minutes into the game. So he might have been the guy who would have been a part of that bench unit, but Tibbs just didn't want him picking up a fourth in the first half, and he ended up sitting the entire first half. So it could have been that simple. Two, I think given how tenuous the Evan Fournier situation is and all the comments that he's made, I think Tibbs almost wants to give him every chance possible to, one, showcase himself to other teams, but two, just get some minutes and hopefully like allow that to prompt him to be a good soldier at the start of the season and say like, hey, like when we could play you, we did. We just don't feel like you help us in actual games, which I don't know. Maybe he'll take that as more of an insult, but he certainly got every opportunity this preseason. Had 2 really good games shooting the ball, had 2 pretty nondescript games, the last 2. I guess we'll see if that carries over to the season, Alex. But personally, I'm not too concerned that is going to be something we'll see during the regular season.
I'm not either, but I'll address that at the open of our next segment, as well as getting into some other notes. We had two releases by the Knicks today, Nathan Knight and Isaiah Roby, who we were just kind of talking up yesterday. So we'll talk about that. Talk about Josh Hart's fantastic play in this particular game, and a bunch more coming up in just a sec. But first, I got to remind everybody that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. And you could snap into the NFL this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. And by and more, I of course mean same game parlays, my absolute favorite. Whether it's football, whether it's basketball, you can go in and in a single game. So let's say you want to do Knicks Celtics next week. You could be like, okay, I think Julius Randle is going to get over 23.5 points. I think Jalen Brunson is going to get over 5.5 assists. I think that Immanuel Quickley is going to get over 2.5 threes. And I think the Knicks are going to win and cover the spread or whatever. And you could put that in, and all those things stack together to give you an even higher amount that you could potentially win, which who doesn't want to win more money if given the opportunity? So visit fanduel.com/locked on and kick off the NFL and I'll note NBA season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, and we're back in. And to pick up where we left off, Gavin, the Fournier thing and the overall rotation, I was a smidge, I won't say concerned, but just at least like confused by the rotation in this game. Again, all signs from everybody that was reporting on the team, and this includes like Mike Breen and Wally Zerbiak, who get, a private meeting with Tibbs before games and stuff like that, and get to sort of have a little bit of a light discussion about games. They were saying the whole game, like, this is a dress rehearsal. This is what you can expect to see, at the beginning of the season, blah, 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 blah. And going on and on about that. And then we do see Evan Fournier take the floor. And I guess with how much Deuce was playing, and particularly like his game yesterday, where he looked real aggressive and looked pretty good and looked more quickly-ish than he has in the past. And same with that second preseason game where he like really shot the ball well. You kind of thought to yourself, like, okay, couldn't you just do what you're gonna do in the season, but just basically slot Deuce in for Quickly? And maybe the Grimes foul trouble was the thing that threw the wrench in that. But it was still a little confusing to me to see Fournier hit the floor that early, and almost makes me wonder if they are considering running a 10-man rotation to start the season. I kind of hope not, because I'm not going to lie, like, there's still not enough with Fournier to impress me right now to say, like, hey, this guy should be playing. It's nice that he's kind of being given this opportunity still a little bit, and like, it had a couple really good preseason games and maybe proved himself to still be worthy of an NBA spot. But on the overall, I think that what all the numbers that Tibbs has alluded to all preseason and offseason say is that he just was not conducive to winning at all last year when he was on the floor. And even if he finds a 40% 3-point stroke again, he's just really not that great on defense. So I kind of question the decision to throw him out there. It almost feels a little like, I don't know, it just felt disjointed from the rest of the idea that this was supposed to be like a regular season dress rehearsal kind of game. But other than that, I really, really liked how Josh Hart played in this game, especially early. I think that two things stood out to me with him. One was the transition offense, which is always great, and the passing, which he was doing both in transition and in the half court, which was awesome. He had some really nice looks from like up at the top of the 3-point line, finding cutters going baseline. I think he had DiVincenzo for one. Mm-hmm. There's one other one, I'm forgetting who it was that he hit the pass to, but had some really nice passes that way. But more importantly than anything, I think I was kind of watching out for, like, all right, in the first big round of subs, he did get put out there as the nominal 4. And I really was curious how that was going to work on defense. And he got matched up with Danilo Gallinari a few times. And Gallo was like clearly trying to exploit that. Like, he clearly thought he was on to something, and called for the ball a couple times. But Hart did a good job. I mean, he proved he's sturdy. He can hold up against a guy that's 6'8" and like pretty well built at this point in his career for Gallinari. Like, he's certainly not string bean he used to be. And he was able to hold him off physically and then contest the shot enough that he kept a really good shooter from getting off a decent mid-range look. So all in all, I was pretty happy with Hart's performance. This was kind of like the only time we really got to see him play this preseason. And I would say that he was one of the success stories in this game.
Yeah, I love the chemistry between him and DiVincenzo. Like he hit DiVincenzo on two different passes that you referenced. And one, DiVincenzo blew the layup. The other one was like I thought the best play of the night outside of the Randle dunk, where it was basically like a ground ball from the top of the key, and DiVincenzo just scooped it up for a nice up and under. And it's so clear that those two guys are going to bring such a great pace and also just so much combined defensive playmaking. I mean, I guess that's just integral to that Villanova DNA. But DiVincenzo had literally, it was like a 3-play sequence, essentially back to back to back, where he put ball pressure on Jordan Poole to induce a turnover. Then the Knicks turned it back over. He raced back in transition to get a contest that forced a miss and led to, I think it was ended up being a Mitchell Robinson putback dunk on the other end of the floor. And then he poked it away from Jordan Poole again. He just has, like, outside of Quentin Grimes, probably, I mean, Josh Hart's right there too, but maybe the best pair of hands on this team. And that is super duper exciting. The other thing with Josh Hart was that he continues to look really confident from 3-point range. Anyone who followed our FIBA coverage this summer knows that was something I was harping on and saying, like, look, in FIBA, he's confident taking them. Will he be comfortable doing it from the NBA line? He made one from like a foot or two behind the arc, and then in a 2-for-1 situation, hit one that was like 4 feet behind the arc. And that just extended range. Like, his shot to me always feels like one that if it were 20 feet, he would be so comfortable with it. And something about 23 feet just throws it off. And I wonder if he just spent this whole summer outside of the Team USA experience, just kind of working on his base and working on extending his range just a couple of feet. That's a great sign for the Knicks, because the reason, and I've said this number a million times and people are going to groan and maybe take a shot every time I say it, but they played at that 57 win pace, 17-8 after getting him, winning their first 9 after getting him, was because he was a 52% 3-point shooter. That completely changed the way teams played him, had him playing like one of the best role players in all of basketball. And then to your point, look great guarding the post. I love that on one play where it seemed like Gallo maybe was going to get the better of him, and it was a really extended post up. Isaiah Hartenstein just dug down and knocked the ball away. And that's the reason I don't have that big of a concern about Hart guarding power forwards. Like, there are just very few guys in the league who, like, especially backup fours, who get a lot of chances to post up. And they're going to be a little bit clunky. And as a defense, you're going to have time to help. You're going to have time to recover, because the modern NBA, you don't have guys who grew up doing that their whole life. So I just think if teams try to go at that nominal mismatch, it's going to end up backfiring on them more often than not.
Yeah, for sure. And I hope that holds up, because I love everything else that Hart brings as the 4 off the bench. And so if the defense is even if he's not perfect, even if there are the moments where, sometimes a guy, kind of overpowers him or outmaneuvers him or whatever, and a guy like Hartenstein is there to kind of make up for the difference even 50% of the time, and then, you could get all the other benefits that having that sort of smaller second unit out there gives you, then I'm all for it. I guess the next thing to get into, because I don't think there was too much more individual player wise in this game. Well, I'll give RJ Barrett a quick shout out. I thought that he looked really good again. I mentioned that first play where he hit Mitch for the alley-oop, but otherwise was looking for Mitch almost to a fault that way throughout the game. But I'm glad to see them really trying to foster their connection again, because that was one of the best things of RJ's second year, the 20 to 21 year, when they would run those just simple little sets. It was they would run it almost every single game. It was actually very reminiscent, now that I think about it. Like that first play when Mitch, kind of gave him the moving, dribble handoff and set the screen for him or whatever. Yep. Very, very similar to the play that they would run at the beginning of almost every game, RJ's sophomore year, where, they would run that quick little pick and roll action with RJ getting moving, getting downhill right away, and finding Mitch for a lob or going all the way in himself. So hopefully that's something they're looking to rekindle. But otherwise, I thought this was, I think the numbers would support this too. I think this is RJ's best 3-point shooting game of the preseason.
He hasn't shot well any other game.
Yeah, I think he was 2 of 8 the last game. In the second game prior to this, and then the first game he was like 0 for something, or maybe I'm mixing those two up. But 3 for 8 in this game, which perfect. I'll take that all day. I think that's good for him, and he looked very comfortable. Looked really great shooting it from the corner. Mike Breen had an interesting note that the MSG stats department brought up, that he apparently shoots like almost 15% better from the right corner versus the left corner. So I guess that's something to keep an eye on this season, and see if he's able to figure out that left corner, or if he kind of just posts up in that right one. But even if he does, and he could shoot 35 to 38% from there, that's solid by me. But yeah, I enjoyed his game. I thought it was good. And I thought Mitch played a good game too. It kind of par for the course for him, but he always seems to have a little extra chip on his shoulder against Daniel Gafford, who sort of picked on him early in his career at different times. And Mitch, I think, really won that matchup today. So that felt good too.
Yeah. Tough outing for Jalen Brunson. We could say real quick, 12 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 5 turnovers, just 3 for 12 from the field, 1 for 5 from 3 in this one. 25 minutes. I mentioned earlier, just some weirdly poor decision-making from him at points. It's not really a concern. He's going to get it together. He's going to be great. I wouldn't be surprised if he came out and dropped 40 in the first game against the Celtics, but just something to watch for a guy who had a very active summer. And then I'm sure has been taking it really easy the last few weeks, knowing just how much is going to be on his shoulders. Maybe it takes him a few games to get going. And then the other thing was, man, the Knicks had trouble with Mike Muscala and Jordan Poole. Those two combined for 44 in the first half. Poole had 29 of them. And I was going to mention that he was torching RJ at points a little bit, but I don't even really blame RJ. It wasn't lazy defense by any means. It was a whole lot of step back, really tough threes. And that's you live by the Jordan Poole, you die by the Jordan Poole. And the Wizards, man, they lived by the Poole tonight. Taj even hit a FU 3 to end the game from the corner. That was a real crapola of a Marchino cherry on top of this terrible performance. So yeah, congrats to the Wizards. Great game. We'll see if it continues into the regular season.
Yep. And I guess final note before we sign off, there was 2 player movements today. So Isaiah Roby gets cut, and Jalen Martin, sort of a head scratcher to me, gets cut off that one 2-way deal. So the Knicks now find themselves with an open 2-way contract. Nathan Knight is still on the one, and the other one belongs to Dylan Windler. So we'll see who ends up, or it is Nathan Knight on the one, right? Yeah, I believe it is. I think that he signed to a 2-way. I don't know. It's a little.
One of them got converted at some point, and that confused me. But anyway.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. Either way, they got an open 2-way contract now with Jalen Martin, which I think they had signed him for 2 years. I'm sure the second year is probably fully non-guaranteed or something, but a little bit of a head scratcher. I guess it must have been that they truly did not like something that they saw from him in camp, because it seemed like they were sort of buying into this kid as a long-term investment. He's super young. He played for Overtime Elite with the Thompsons and all that. And there was thought of maybe this guy, maybe there's something there. And, he had some really good performances with OTE, and, it seemed like they were going to kind of just let him play with Westchester this whole year and develop a bit. And so maybe they're still planning on signing him to Westchester, and they just have someone else in mind for that other 2-way deal or something. And they feel like they're not in danger of losing him to anyone else. I don't know what the deal is. I guess we'll see over the coming days if he ends up in Westchester or not. But also Roby getting cut, kind of weird after he had that really good 3-point shooting performance. We were like, man, maybe this guy could be a break in case of emergency option. It's nope, never mind. He's gone. So is what it is, I guess. Maybe they just decided there's only one guy with a giant fro allowed on the team, and it's going to be Jericho Sims. I don't know.
Yeah, so you're stepping on some toes, buddy, and you have to go. Yeah, I don't know. It kind of aligns with my theory that probably none of the coaches overreact to any of the preseason games, even though it's hard not to, unless it's just a flash of athleticism you didn't expect or something. Obviously, some guys are going to shoot well, some guys aren't. But I'm with you, just because he brought the idea of getting shooting from a power forward size player outside of Julius Randle is just not an option that the Knicks have. So again, in a world where Randle would potentially get hurt, I think it'd be nice to play Isaiah Roby 10 minutes a game as someone who could just you have to guard him from 3, and he isn't going to absolutely get you killed on the other end of the floor. So I was a little surprised by that. And I'm wondering what the value of presumably if someone like Daquan Jeffries or Ryan Arcidiacono makes the team. I think I'd rather have Roby, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I'm not going to lose any sleep over this preseason game. Week out till Knicks basketball, Alex. Plenty of good content on the way before that. But until that drops, he's Alex Wolfe. I'm Gavin Schall. We will talk to you very, very soon on Locked On Knicks.